Having replaced the Ottomans, Britain rules as a colonial power over the lives of Arabs and Jews in Palestine. Its authority will soon be challenged. In what became known as the Balfour Declaration, the British promised the Jews a home in Palestine. Tel Aviv's streets are filled with Jewish immigrants who escaped the pogroms and hardship of Eastern Europe and Russia, hoping to build a new life. But reality soon shatters the dream. Palestine's Arab majority is furious at the promise of a Jewish homeland, considering Palestine Arab land. Britain tries to appease the Arabs and in a secret white paper restricts Jewish immigration to Palestine. This infuriates the Jews.
Like the British, we also have something to die for. The land. This is something more valuable than life, and something we will die for.
Britain sends more troops to Palestine to restore order. The Jews know they cannot defeat the British by military means. They must resort to a different type of struggle, urban terrorism.
We knew that this was the only way to build a state. If we hadn't fought the British, there would have been no state.
To fight the British, the Jews form an underground terrorist organization called the Irgun. Their goal was to strike at symbols of British rule.
The Irgun to which I belonged conducted selective terror. They never killed women or children if they could help it. They just killed the soldiers and the officers and the officials of the occupying power, the colonial power. But even then, by accident or not accident, civilians were killed. I stayed in the Irgun for about 4 years. I left the Irgun, which at the time was quite an unusual thing to do. We had an anthem, which one of whose lines said, "We shall be released from the ranks only by death." And we believed in this.
In the 1930s, persecuted by the Nazi regime, thousands of Jews escaped from Germany and flee to Palestine. Successive waves of refugees doubled the Jewish population, threatening the Arab majority. Violence soon breaks out.
When we came to 1936, the atmosphere was ready for a sort of a decision, for a sort of a rebellion. It was fear that as long as these things go on, then there is a danger that Palestine one day would go into somebody else from its own owners.
It is a full-scale rebellion by Arabs, a bloodbath, as Arabs attack Jews. Jewish communities are protected by a defensive home guard, the Haganah. But the underground Irgun escalates the violence and launches a campaign of terrorism against the Arabs. The Irgun recruits volunteers, eager to join the struggle despite the danger.
To live in an underground organization like that is an experience which somebody who has not been in it cannot quite understand. It fills your life completely. It gives purpose to your whole life. Every minute in your life, waking or sleeping, you are a member. You live in constant danger.
The key to an effective terrorist campaign is publicity. The Irgun realizes this and makes sure its actions receive widespread exposure. Leaflets publicize the Jewish cause, and warnings before blowing up buildings spread fear, another important element of terrorism. But within the ranks of the Irgun, a militant group breaks away and forms a radical splinter group called the Stern Gang. Working in tiny cells, they gather intelligence and escalate the violence. Their leader is Avraham Stern.
He was on the one hand a fighter, on the other hand a poet. He wrote poems, a man of books.
In the 1930s, Stern is a student at the University of Florence when Italy is in turmoil. Mussolini's fascists roam the streets, inflicting terror and fear. Their tactics and organizational skills impress Stern. He believes in violence to achieve political goals and writes poems glorifying martyrdom.
Stern had become convinced that in order to succeed, a national movement must produce its own martyrs. The British would not live unless forced to do so by a very determined movement which would be ready to form and to produce martyrs. Since Stern was a great idealist, he saw himself as the archetype of martyrs.
In Palestine, the Stern Gang does not hesitate to use ruthless tactics. To support its campaign of terrorism, it blackmails shop owners and robs banks. When 2 Jewish policemen are killed in one of its operations, Palestine's Jews turn against the Stern Gang.
Lots of people were against Stern.
So what? They were afraid it would disturb them, that the British would make problems for them. But a lot of people helped out behind the scenes, in quiet.
But many called you terrorists.
So what? Do you think we were offended?
During World War II, Stern's hatred of the British drove him to consider an alliance with Nazi Germany. In 1941, he sent an envoy to the Nazis to discuss a possible collaboration against their common enemy. The Germans turned down his request. In Palestine, Stern becomes a pariah. Eventually, he is ambushed and killed by the British.
When they became so unpopular that no one was ready to help them, it was a child's play. The leader was caught and killed and no one cared a damn about it. There was no outcry against it because everybody said it serves him right. He's crazy.
Future Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, an adherent of IRA tactics, inherits the leadership.
My code name was the name of the famous fighter from the Irish Liberation War, Michael Collins. Michael. Michael is Mikhail in Hebrew.
In 1944, the terrorism spreads to Cairo. Lord Moyne, Britain's highest-ranking government official in the Middle East, is assassinated by 2 of Stern's gunmen. Their murderous act draws the world's attention to Palestine.
Our war was not a war of hatred. It was a war of dedication, of love to Israel's people and land.
In 1945, the Second World War is over. Jewish Holocaust survivors now look toward Palestine as their last refuge. But Britain restricts immigration, turning many ships away. Many refugees are deported to Cyprus. In the wake of the horror of the concentration camps, once again Jews find themselves behind barbed wire. This callous policy inflames the fervor of the Jewish underground, and the Irgun intensifies the fight to expel the British once and for all.